All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar with brand strategist Tara Ladd. This is part two in the series. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that the Rootlings program acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and sea in the communities that we live, work, and farm on. I'd also like to extend any acknowledgement of the Indigenous people that are with us today. And I'd also like to finally acknowledge that the Rootlings program and this webinar is made possible by funding from Wine Australia. But hand it over to you, Tara.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. But first, a big hello to everybody. Feel free to jump into the chat. I want this to be super fun and engaging. Don't feel embarrassed. There is no silly question. Let me just share this with you now before I start waffling on. Hang on, where is it? There we go. Alrighty. Can everybody see that? Yep. Cool. Cool. All right. Let me get the chat back up so I know who's talking to me. Where'd it go? My gosh, here we go. I don't know what I just did with it. Hey, Jenna, can you keep your eye on the chat for me?
Yes, for sure.
Thanks. Because I don't know, it's just disappeared on my screen. Okay, cool. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Tara. I am a brand strategist at brand agency Your One and Only. I will give you a big spiel about it. Obviously, it's my second time here. For everyone that was here last time, hello again. For everyone that is joining us this time, I will give you a little bit of an intro on the next slide. But this time, I want to work together as opposed to just speaking at you like I did last time. Both were needed, but this one's more of a hands-on, let's get into it. So hopefully everyone's downloaded the worksheet. There was a typo in it, my bad. I've also got a link to it on one of the slides coming up. And if you haven't got it, it's there. But you don't need it. It's more of a guide, and grab a piece of paper if you'd prefer to do something similar to that too. We will just be led by what the questions are within the worksheet. So let's slide on to number two. This is me. I am, as I said, the founder of Your One and Only. I have two boys. I'm a brand strategist. I started off as a graphic designer and then obviously worked my way up. I've been in the industry for 18 years, so that's just a nice throw in the park. I also am neurodivergent. You will find that later on. I am also quite empathetic, but a straight shooter. So there's that. But today, what I want to do with you all is build the strategic foundation that helps make everything else more effective within either you doing the brand yourself or you working within another brand. Both have different approaches, but at the end of the day, it's a very similar kind of outcome. First and foremost, stop. Also, being a millennial, you're going to get a GIF every now and then. That's just my vibe. Stop competing and start owning. I think with most businesses, they try to fit in, and the problem with doing that is that you actually don't stand out at all. And what I find the biggest issue with brands is that they actually don't know what their differentiation is. And so that common question that I'm always asked is, how do I stand out in the market, and how do I get people's attention? And the general answer to that is that you probably haven't found your differentiation, and that's fine. This will come from this workshop, or you're not going to create a whole strategy by the end of it, but it should prime you with the right, mindset. So by the time you're finished, you will have some ideas going. So yes, most people will mimic what other people are doing. If there's a brand that's been successful, they will try and copy the same strategy. And, that's why we see a whole bunch of what we consider Me Too brands, where there's a category leader. There's obviously in your space, it's probably one of the main wine brands. And then everyone else tries to be similar to that brand. We don't want to do that. And the same, I guess you would say the same thing is like Coke and Pepsi, we like KFC and Macca's, it's very much like that. But the result is we get crowded markets where everyone sounds the same, looks the same, and quite frankly, the consumer is really bored. So we want to make sure that we're trying to do something quite different and, stand out from the crowd. Let me get this chat back up if I can find it. So what I want to do, everyone has access to their chat. I don't know if anyone wants to vibe here, but I want to know how everyone's feeling within their industry. Are they feeling confident at the moment in what you're doing? Are you feeling like you're a bit lost? Chuck in a couple of words into the chat and let me know what the vibes are, so I can kind of pinpoint what we need to talk about. Is if you're working within another business, then the direction of what we talk about can change. But if you're doing your own business, then we can kind of start by, I guess, what you want to do and how you want to build out, your story. But if no one wants to chat, that's fine too. So what we're going to do is roll it out. There it is. We're going to roll it out today into 4 sections. This is our framework. It's got 3 sections here. 4 is like the extension once we've done that. Jenna says a bit burnt out, marketing wine brand. Yes. Yes, this is what we're going to hopefully dive into today. And this is one thing that I think should open your eyes a little bit more. So this is our framework, dissect DNA and design. It's called the D3 framework. This is what we use to create identity systems. And so that's basically how you fit into the market, what your positioning is, how you differentiate, and then how you obviously create the perception. And so part 1 is dissect. So where do you actually stand? Section 2 will be your DNA. So it's your identity. So what's your strategic foundation? Part 3 is the design, which is what a lot of people get confused with. They think the visual identity is the brand identity, but it's not. I would like to say, would you classify who you are by what you wear? No, it's just an extension of who you are. It's an expression. So we also call the design brand expression. So that's just how you connect with people, because obviously what you look like will attract the crowd that will, be in that space. If you're attracting a high luxury crowd or an audience that are high caliber, you want to be seen as expensive and luxurious, then you're going to use typography and colors and designs that would fit within that space. However, if you're targeting a more youthful generation, or you're wanting to do something that's a bit, rough around the edges, or something a bit, personality driven, then you can completely shake it up on its head. You could create something that's really bright and really colorful. There are so many different avenues that you can take. So design actually can really skew the way that someone will perceive your brand. And then number 4 is action. So this is essentially, once you've created the brand identity itself, is how you then explain that to the audience. It's your brand narrative, and it is your marketing, essentially. It's how you communicate to an audience. So now I've got that out of the way. This is the workbook that you will need. If you don't have it, I would suggest to download it. Let me see if I've got this link here for you. I've also jumped the link into the chat, so if you don't have it yet, you can click on that there and grab it if you're on your phone, for instance, and that should give you a PDF of the worksheet. And the worksheet, if I can open that up, mind me, don't worry about me. Let's close that one. Is this one. So I obviously don't have this in the, oh goodness me, Command 0. So it's going to look really messy for a second, but I just want to walk you through this. This is what the workbook looks like. This is what will be what you should have on your end. And basically it's a bunch of different questions that we're going to be working through that will help you to understand, or at least prompt you with the right things for you to kind of get working on. So we've got section 1, which is the current brand reality. So I will talk you through that in a moment. And then we've got all of these questions that you can answer as we go through. So this is what you will be answering, as we kind of touch base. So on part 1, we will be looking at finding what makes you stand out. This is the biggest one. This is essentially, if you're working with another business, then you will probably have pre-existing, stories and values and whatever it is that you're working with. If you are starting your own business, then these are what you set to create the trajectory of your brand. So I don't know how many of you have heard, obviously I'm going to do a lot of talking to the camera, so I hope you've got my face here somewhere. I didn't want to make it too, slide heavy. But I don't know if you've heard of the wine music study. It's a psychology study that they did in North Hargreaves, I think it was. But it was basically a study on a wine shop, a British wine shop, where they did a test on music and how influential music could be in the purchasing of wine. And so what happened was one day they played French music and French wine sales went up 77%. They did the same thing because they thought it could have been a fluke. They did the same thing with German music, and then German wine sales jumped up 73%. Now, the cool thing about that is that only 6% of customers were aware that the music influenced their choice. So this is what I consider, this is what we wrap up into at our studio at One and Only. We're very much into behavioral science, is that we understand that there are unconscious drivers that actually make people buy from you. And it goes so much further than what something looks like. Now, of course, what something looks like matters, obviously. They found their way to the German wine, but it is a really good indication that we have 5 senses that we use all the time. So we can go by what something looks like, what something sounds like, what something feels like. The tactile response is really important as well. So don't know if you, I mean, obviously you've all picked up a bottle of wine. There's a difference when the label has been, there's a slight texture on the label. That makes a bit of a difference when there's an emboss in the way that the design's been done. So if there's like a foiling or something that's done, that's actually a tactile thing. So people are feeling that. It feels like it's more expensive. There's a big difference between when you get a birthday card or, a wedding invitation, for instance, and it's done on, thin and flimsy cardboard versus something that's like really thick GSM stock, with a nice texture on it. It's going to feel more expensive when something, when the textures are different as well. So that's like a tactile response that you need to take into consideration. So music is obviously something that, we hear and it can influence. That's why whenever you're at a fine dining restaurant, you will hear them play classical music and jazz music. It's slow, it's calm. And then, it really does create that environment. It's a similar thing to if you are completely lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, if you were to go into a Dan Murphy's, pick up a bottle of wine from the shelf as a general consumer. If you're buying for a friend, then you're going to be buying for who that friend is. So if you're going to be choosing something, you're going to try and find a bottle of wine that will align with the identity of the person that you're buying for. So you're not going in and going, yes, I love to drink, really expensive, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of wine because all of you guys will just absolutely shaft me on that. But, if you're going in to get a Pinot Noir, for instance, and you go in and they're the same alcohol percentage to the general wine consumer, they're just going, yep, that's a red. That's the same style or, the same variant that they like to drink. And that's about the same price point. Now, what are they going to do? They're going to look for the packaging. And to look at what the packaging looks like. They're going to see if that's going to fit within who they are as a person and as a designer, because I'm a bit of a snob that way. I will always go for the design that looks really cool. It'll be some kind of graphic on the front. It'll be a little bit rough, like a rogue kind of style. I'm not going to buy something that looks really like, I guess, high luxury because it's just not who I am. It's generally not who my friends are. I'm a bit, of a quirky kind of creative. So I'm going to look for something that is in alignment to that. And that's kind of the stuff that I end up buying. So the stuff that I did a really cool Instagram post on this like 2 years ago, actually, where I just posted like 4 or 5 different wine packaging, labels as an example. And I said, which one do you all like the most? And they all chose the same one. It's really funny, like primed them. And so I said, do you know why you all chose that, that specific label? And they said, I don't know, it just felt different. And it was black. It was the only label that was a black label amongst all 3 that were white. So they chose the one that just looked different and they didn't even realize why. And then I made them realize that all of the actual labels that I had chosen for them to choose from, none of them had a logo on it. Not one of them had a logo on it. They were all design based. So they chose a bottle of wine by what it looked like and did not care that it didn't have a logo on it. So I want to point out that it's all about the experience. You're actually building for who the audience is that you're selling to, and it's all about the emotional outcome. So put simply, what customers really buy. We need to look at traditional winery language, so sustainable farming, hand harvest, all of the stuff that you just said then, Jenna. Family owned. The customer translation to that is process, process, process. And then we need to look at the emotional outcome language, which is the wine that turns dinner into an event. So what are these cues that you can use? Like, this is why copywriting is really important and messaging is really important, because it's all about the way that you frame the emotional language. And that can just be one line on the front of a wine bottle. You know what I mean? There's some really cool craft beer labels that have their T's and C's that are written really quirky. So usually you would have ingredient listings or something that are quite boring, and they've done them in a way that you want to read the boring stuff because you don't know what's coming, because it's so unpredictable. And so it's these tiny little touch points that you can add in that make all of the difference. So at the end of the day, customers don't buy wine, they're buying the transformation. So when you say transformation, it's what is the outcome that they're actually wanting, and how can you build that into the way that you market your wine. The features are proof points, the emotions are the purchase drivers. So we need to look at what emotional need does our wine fulfill. And so when we look at, like, I'm just jumping in here. Yes, that's really cool. So Emily's just named her rosé table dancer. Perfect. That's exactly, it's an emotion. It's what you feel when you drink the wine. It's definitely the what would happen after you drink a few of them, but it's definitely vibe. So you've already created a perception from that. So I'm thinking straight away, when I see table dancer, I'm thinking girls, hens nights, giving like girls nights where they've got a bottle of wine, they're all having fun, they're all getting a bit tipsy. To me, that's straight away what that represents. That's what our brains do without you even realizing. They create their own associations, their own mental shortcuts for whatever it is that they're buying, because every single brand that goes out, regardless of what it is a reflection of your identity. People buy badged cars because they are a reflection of wealth, they are a reflection of status, they are a reflection of how they fit within society. Everyone is fine. You can totally be quiet. You don't need to do anything in the process. If you can't fill out things, we can also do that later. But what I kind of want to draw attention to is, like, giving you these tips before I kind of give you, because we're going to break into like 10-minute increments for you to kind of fill some things out or write them down. Because what I find is sometimes when we go through a workshop and someone talks at you the whole time, you may have come up with an idea in the process and then you completely lose it by the time the whole session's over. So what I'm trying to do is, like, break you into 10-minute sections, and in a minute I'll go, okay, here's a whole bunch of information for just this section. How can you now apply it to this part of the worksheet? So that's kind of what I'm going to try and do with you today. And today we're looking at this section is the dissect. So obviously we're talking about emotion, but then we also talk about things like, let's talk about reframing your wine story, for instance. So if you were to look at, instead of estate-grown grapes, you could say every bottle tells the story of our land. Or you could say 20 years of experience says 2 decades perfecting moments of joy. You've got award-winning vineyard, which is recognition for creating unforgettable experiences. Or small batch production is crafted for those who appreciate the exceptional. And then we've got traditional methods, which could be honoring the rituals that bring people together. Do you see how this is the same shit, just reframed in a way that just sounds so much better? It's also called framing. That's a psychological thing that people do, where I think Apple use it really well, where instead of saying something technical like, our 5 gigabit camera, blah, 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 such and such technology to unlock, they'll just say as much security as a fingerprint to open your phone. and you know how much security your fingerprint has because everyone knows they've got their own fingerprint. So it's just using the language that the customer wants. Like I always say, simplify the complex. Put it in the language of the person that you're selling to every day of the week. This is actually got a big series going on about this exact thing at the moment, where it's, if you create something that sounds too hard for someone to understand, they're not going to buy it because it's cognitive overwhelm to them. When we are, this is where the knowledge gap kind of comes into play. When we're in a space, we kind of technically use our own jargon without realizing, and then it can become really overwhelming for the consumer. And sometimes we find that those that are winning and we don't know why, and they're, you may be way better than them. It may just be because their marketing messaging is a lot simpler for the people to complex. You know what I mean? Like I say to people, if you're trying to do a presentation, for instance, put one message per slide. If you've got 50,000 things on the slide, everyone goes, oh my God, it's too much. It's always simplicity will always work every day of the week. So features are proof points for emotional claims, and lead with the feeling and support with the facts. So test your messaging and see, does it trigger an emotion or is it just an explanation? Okay, so then we need to look at how to trigger the right associations. And so if we look at visual cues, we look at, does packaging design evoke your emotional territory? And by emotional territory, I mean, when you think of a brand, how does that make you feel? And does that consistently do that for your audience? And if it doesn't, perfect. You've got plenty of opportunity to create that. This is the thing with brand, is that it should be like marketing. I think people see brand as once they've done it, it's done. Whereas brand and marketing work side by side. And I think that we're seeing a lot of behaviors change really rapidly with the rise of social media now that we're all got information at at the tip of our fingers. We're seeing brands now, and I'm personally, we used to see brands refresh like every 7 years. We're now seeing them refresh almost every 3 to 4. And I think that's just because we're watching things evolve so quickly. And when I say refresh, I don't mean, you need a whole big, spend thousands and thousands of dollars to redo things. It's evolutionary tweaks, right? So it might be that you slightly change a color, or you bring in a different font choice, or you've gone and got a new shot of photography, which brings in a different style. It's just modernizing it as you go. Rather than doing these big chunky rebrands, you're kind of evolving. It's like an ongoing movement. I don't know if anyone saw the Triple J rebrand, I think it was in the last year, at the beginning of this year, where they've brought in what they consider to be a variable typeface, which means that it can actually scale in so many different lengths. It can go thin, it can go fat. It's very, very different, and usually in branding, they would say one font, one this, one that. Now they have stayed within this is where it can kind of get messy. A lot of designers were like, how are they going to do that? But it's given them the versatility to stay within a framework, but to create some movement as the time goes on. So think of things like that as you're going, because brand is really the memory. So marketing is how you tell people. Brand is the memory. It's the identity of the business that you have. So if you find that, you have new leadership, or you are moving into a new market, that's when you kind of look at doing rebrands. Or if you're wanting to attract a new audience, that's kind of when you look at the shift there. But when we're looking at, I guess for you guys, we look at visual cues like packaging design that evokes your emotional territory. We look at tasting room atmosphere that it reinforces your story. So when people think visuals, they think design. Visuals isn't just design, it's actually the experience. So I don't know if you've ever been to like a really cool bathroom at a restaurant. It really does spark that. You're like, oh, cool. There might be a TV in the bathroom, or there's some like cool lighting. I did the same thing. I went to an event the other week where they had this industrial lighting in the bathroom, and I just thought it was so cool. And so it's like these little touch points of visual touch points that you can place in places like, a bookshelf, or something in like the tasting rooms that is just different to everyone else, that gives it visual appeal. There's a lot of cafes in Sydney at the moment that are bringing in like this murals on the wall, neon things on the wall that are creating experiences. So you're going there to take a photo in front of the wall, or be there in that space. So when you think of visuals, think about the whole vibe. And so then we look at, I guess, verbal cues is language patterns that connect to customer identity, and stories that place your wine with emotional, with the emotional context. We look at experiential, which is what I just said then. So it's like, Service style that reflects your brand personality. So I don't know if anyone remembers, what was it, the Karen, it was like a Karen cafe in Sydney where they were just really rude to you. I don't know if it lasted, but it was just like this whole thing, but that was totally their shtick. That's a brand personality, right? So it's doing it in line with what that brand represents. There's so many brands that lack personality. And when I say personality, I don't mean you have to be big, bold, and audacious. I mean that it's just something that makes you who you are. Like you would all have friends that you would go to for certain circumstances. Presume you would have friends in work and then friends that you've got at home and friends if you do sport. Like that's because you share the same values, and that's very similar to who you would go to. You know, it's like segmenting, right? So you know the personality and you will connect with people because of that. And so then we also look at, like, again, events that demonstrate your wine's emotional role. So could you put on some kind of tasting experience that's more like a carnival, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, I'm not telling you to do that, but like if you're like a more upbeat fun, instead of doing it what the standard way of doing it is, could you create something that's like so left kilter that people are like, oh, this is really different? It's always about something that's just slightly pushed too far to that way, and you can create a whole different experience that gets people talking. Then we look at, I guess, cultural cues as well. So, references that connect to customer values and positioning within cultural conversations. And then we also look at, reframing your competitive advantage. So the old question could be, what makes our wine different? Where the new question needs to be, what emotional need does our wine fulfill that the customers can't easily get elsewhere? What is it that you provide that they can't get elsewhere? Okay, so I'm going to pause you now for about 5 to 10 minutes. Not long, but I'm going to pause you for 5 to 10 minutes. I'm going to mute my mic. I'll come in when there's a minute left. And I want you to do the first two parts of the worksheet, or at least read over it and just start writing some notes. And by all means, if you have any questions when you're doing it, please jump in and ask me. I'll be monitoring the chat in the process. So let's just take 10 now. I'll set a timer and then I'll come back. Okay, I'll give you guys another minute and then we'll cut it short. Okay, I'll leave it there, and we'll if you we can have any questions, feel free to jump in and ask me later. But for now, we'll kind of move on to the next stage. So part two is the DNA. So after you kind of develop a bit of insight on your industry and how you think you need to be speaking, the important part to develop is your DNA. So stage one is essentially like research, where stage two is more like your strategic foundation of if you were to build a house, you're kind of now creating the slab and the frame that would build that brand on. And so the main components are your purpose, your deeper why, the reason that you exist. If you are working within a business, it would be why the founders started. And if we're going back like years and years and years and years, there will be something else that is driving the new purpose. And that might be, if it's a legacy or whatever that may be, there's usually some kind of alignment to what the intention of the brand is and what they're trying to achieve. And then we look at the personality. So the personality is essentially how you show up in the world. So are you funny? Are you serious? Are you witty? Like all of these things are traits of the personality, just like a person. And they need to be wrapped up in a similar way to how you would execute a brand, because the personality then dictates who you're talking to, how you speak, what you look like, what type of events you would run or what type of products that you would have. It would impact naming, marketing approach. And when we're looking at marketing approach, like if you're a more edgy kind of brand, you would be doing kind of really cool videos, and it the cuts of the video would change, or the music that you would use would change. Whereas if you're a more luxurious brand, you would have things like slower music and more like professional shots. And so it all really comes down to how you execute. And if you haven't got that strategic foundation laid down, then you really can't do part two. If you were trying to be a more luxurious brand and then you're doing like these edgy, like I guess, videos that don't align, then there's a disconnect with how people would then see your brand. And so that's why it's really important to make sure that there is synergy across the board. And so I guess when most brands fail to connect, it's usually because 89% of brands are functionally identical in the customer's mind. How good's that? People make decisions in 90 seconds, and that's 90% done subconsciously without them even realizing why they've chosen someone. They'll just go, I don't know, it just felt right. And then we look at brands that focus on what they do and not how they make people feel. So we've already had a bit of a touch on that, but that's essentially why most brands fail. And we're looking at the evolution of how we interact with brands now. Like back in the day, no one used to have a two-way conversation with a brand. It was just like, we buy from you. Thanks. Whereas now, like the consumer is expecting that brand to rock up. They want to know how things are made. They want to know where it's coming from. They want to know who works there. Now, I don't know if you've seen, even in the last 5 years, we've seen the huge rise of personal brand. It goes from being we're a brand as a business to being we are personal brands that work within a business brand. And so you will see a lot of successful business brands actually promote a lot of their internal staff members, because they are essentially personal brands within the business brand that generate something like 7 times more leads for the business. So if you start to have individual, they're almost like a modern day brand ambassador. They're, instead of hiring an influencer or hiring a huge celebrity to do the work, you're actually building connections with everyday people from with inside the business. That's actually really cool because everyone is their own person. Just be careful you're doing some vetting processes before you go and chuck someone online. But it is very much like that now. So that's kind of why we're seeing it. And also personal brands are getting a lot more hits to their, to their social media accounts versus business brands. I've noticed the dip in my business brand versus my personal brand. So that's something to also consider. Just another thing to add to the mix. But the way that we look at it is brand connections happen at an emotional level first, and people connect with brands like they connect with people now. So if the brand isn't in alignment to their values, and trust me, there are a lot of beliefs and values getting thrown around these days, people are going to align to the business that is closer to who they are as a person. I mentioned this in one of the content pieces that I've done over the past couple of days, and it was about Ben and Jerry's. They're a very social activist business, but people that buy from them, they're buying because they are in alignment to what they stand for. So for instance, Ben and Jerry's had, it was like, all I've got, as I sat here, because this is what I was working with. I ate it, so obviously didn't get to record with the ice cream inside because I got happy. But it's really just about making sure that you're aligning or knowing exactly who your audience is that you're targeting, not worrying about anyone else, and really hammering down on what it is that they like. Because the more specific that you get, the more, and I think everyone thinks, oh, but then I'm going to lose a big share of market. I would encourage you to go and look at the money that the wine industry makes. And then I want you to tell me how much of that you're making, because there are a lot of people buying wine, and there are also a lot of segments that fit within who buys wine. And so it's really interesting the way I explain it, like Rihanna, and she created Fenty, and Fenty became a billion-dollar brand purely because she extended the shade range to be darker and lighter on either end, and it became more inclusive, and people bought her brand. That was it. She wasn't doing anything different. It was still makeup. She just did something slightly different, and more people bought from her. I did the same thing when I went into a chemist. I had 2 identical kids' cold and flu tablet thingies or syrups to choose from. And the one that I ended up buying, because they were both almost identical, was the one that ended up donating 5 cents from every bottle to a children's foundation. That was it. That was what it came down to. So if there is nothing else for them to choose from, they're going to choose the most mundane thing. And the way I like to see it is that your visual identity is an attribute, and so is your product, essentially. The brand is what people look at first. It's what they align with. It's what you're saying. It's what you're doing, because you could have the best product going around, but if that person doesn't align with the way that you think and I guess put yourself out there, they're not going to buy from you anyway. It's just like that. So this is where values really come in. So the DNA is where you start to develop the brand values. And so people connect with brands, like I said, they connect with people. So your brand needs a personality that attracts your ideal customer. And the purpose isn't like marketing stuff. Like you'll hear everyone needs a purpose and they'll just snob it off. It's actually the strategic anchor for decision making. Why you're in business is the reason why you would build your whole identity, and that is why people would buy from you. In Ben and Jerry's case, it was social activism. They weren't selling ice cream, they're selling social activism. And they've been doing that for 40 odd years. And that's why they are, I mean, there's a whole thing about them, and we'll talk about that later. That's all changing. But yeah, it's that's why their brand is the way it is today, and why they sold to Unilever, which is the problem, for $8 billion in an acquisition, because they had developed such a strong brand, and everyone knew that they didn't sell ice cream, and it was so much more than that. So that's what people are actually expecting from brands these days. I mean, it's annoying when you just want to sell a product, but it's actually how people will buy things. It's why you would buy clothes from a certain shop, or certain brands' shoes, or you will have, if you were to choose every single brand every single time you went to buy something, you would be in cognitive overload. So the main goal is to get your brand into the consideration set of your audience, which is like the 3 top choices. So if I said to you right now, we're going to buy a TV tomorrow, you would already have 3 brands in your head. And that is your own selection. That's no one else's. That's your own selection based on what you've seen, what you've heard, what you know about them, what you've been exposed to. And that's why marketing matters, because it's consistently putting the message out. So when someone is ready to buy, that is what comes up to their mind first. So keep that in mind and why all of that makes sense. So we look at the profit versus purpose motive, and we've seen this really evolve over the last few years. It kind of in the 90s, 2000s, no one really cared about who the business was. They just bought from them because they needed to buy something. Then we saw the evolution of Web 2.0. So obviously more people were able to connect. It was a two-way conversation. We saw the rise of social media. That's when the purpose-driven stuff came in, because people were able to research brands and find out what they were about, who runs the company, all of that type of stuff. And we're now moving into the next iteration, which is really about the people. So we're looking at who's running it, who's behind it, which is why you've seen the rise of the people, like the personal brand, because people want to know. And even the way we engage in social media conversations at the moment, we're looking at, it's like a series. On TikTok, people are following people because they just want to be a fly on the wall in their life. They want to know what their days, it's like a mini series. You're seeing these people rock up. You're interested in who they are. You want to know what they're doing, everything about them. If they were to drop off the face of the earth, it feels like your favorite show just stopped. So it's very much what it's about. Series, like the series type stuff is really popular at the moment online, like that, generating the what's coming next, I need to know, behind the scenes content. This is what it's like to work with us. This is what it's like to, what the relationship's like, because you're essentially selling trust. That's what you're trying to do with your content, is sell trust so the consumer wants to buy from you. So when I say that creating meaning, when I talk about creating meaning that matters, I'm talking about things like, to give you an example, if you look at like a weak purpose statement, it would be something like to provide quality wine to customers, or to be the leading winery in our region, or to create exceptional wine experiences. They're like, everyone has those. So strong purpose statements would be something like to preserve family traditions in a fast-changing world, or to prove sustainability doesn't mean compromise, or to create moments where strangers become friends. So things like that. So the purpose filter is, would your team make sacrifices to defend this purpose? Would customers pay more money to support this purpose? And does this purpose guide difficult decisions? So ours here at Your One and Only is about being here for the misfits. Like, we're here for the ones that want to create change and create like systemic change. And we're here for the ones that don't want to do things how it's been done. So anyone that wants to come and work with us is all about, I want to do things different. I don't want to do it how everyone's done it. And we're like, great, let's go. So we will challenge you. When people come and work with us, we're not here to say yes to you. We're here to kind of tell you the hard stuff. And the hard stuff is where you make the changes. And so one of the first things that I put down on a piece of paper when I left my old agency to start my business, and I still go to it these days, is don't put shit to market. That was on my post-it, and to this day, I stand by that statement. It's almost like a manifesto. What do you call it? One of the things on the wall. And that's because there were so many people contributing to pointless messages that I didn't want to be part of that conversation. And everything that I've done in the process to building the business has always like centralized around that one thing. So what is your purpose? And it doesn't have to be, you can rename purpose, but it's like an objective. What's the reason that you exist? Like, why is that there? And I always say to someone to go, if you're fairly new, go back to the beginning. Why do you want to do this? Why did you decide to do something that already exists? Why didn't you just go work from someone else? If that's the case, like if the brand's been around for a while, what does it stand for now? And if you don't know, then that's a sure sign to do a rebrand. That's when you need to get the head people in a room, but not only the head people, you need to get everyone in. I would say customer service. I would say people out on the fields. I would say every single person that has a play in that business, so that you can get perspectives from all different types, including audiences that will, and long-term clients, short-term clients, because they will give you content gold. And that's how you would build out where you want to go in the world that we live in today. And so I guess should be that purpose should be emotionally resonant, not logically obvious. It's like, when every time you see a podiatrist and you see a foot in the logo, it's like, oh wow, they do podiatry. Cool. Like it's so common. Everyone does it. And someone that does it differently, everyone's like, oh. So we saw this with Who Gives a Crap with toilet paper. pretty boring segment, but they decided to go, hey, let's give toilet paper a personality. And they made a lot of money because of it. And they also wrapped a social, initiative behind it, which is cool as well. So they stand for something that's more than just selling toilet paper. And that's what people like. If they're going to buy something mundane like toilet paper, they're probably going to put their money into something that would give back or something that's fun. I personally buy Who Gives a Crap. I mean, the giving back thing's a nice altruistic, thing to do, but I'm a designer and their designs are cool. So, and they're funny. So one of their segments, I think, is, let's uncrap this. And then they break apart current news narratives and call out the bias in the way that news headlines have been done. They sell toilet paper. So I just want to show you how that works when they sell toilet paper, but they're talking about the media. So it's really interesting the way that they've tied that in. So don't limit yourself to what you can talk about. If there is an option for you to wrap up something, go for it. And especially if your industry isn't already doing it, that's a really good opportunity for you. So it should differentiate you from competitors who would say the same thing. And the test is if another winery could copy and paste your purpose, it's too generic. And I could say that there's probably a lot out there that are like that. The great purpose statements also create emotional territory that's hard to replicate. So you would create something that someone else couldn't do. That comes from conversations and creative brainstorms and really cool places. So think about that. We'll talk about as you fill out, keep that in mind. But the next part is brand personality architecture. So if we're going to talk about brand personality, if your brand was a person at a dinner party, who would it be? I always ask this question in our strategy conversations of, if your brand was a celebrity, who would it be? And everyone goes, oh, I don't know. I'm like, well, how are you marketing? Because if you don't know, if you couldn't give me they're kind of like, then how are you actually having conversations? Because that should be the consistent flow of what you say, who you are, what you do, the way you say it, and who you're talking to. The way I sell our brand is that we're Reese Witherspoon with a kick of Lily Allen. And I think that everyone kind of goes, oh yeah, I see that. It's probably the other way around now, but it's very much about finding those things that people can kind of go, oh yeah, I see that. And when I give people these really good questions, it makes them think. It doesn't have to be a celebrity. It could be, an old artist or something. It's just something of influence that people can assimilate and remember, that everyone kind of gets onto the same page with. So the way they look at the personality framework is the energy level. So you do like a Richter scale of 1 to 10. Are they calm or energetic? Are they reserved or are they outgoing? Is the communication style direct or is it nuanced? Is it formal or is it casual? And we look at the social role. Are you a leader or are you a supporter? Are you a traditionalist or are you a rebel? So there's different ways that you can look at this. And then obviously there's ways that you can break down the value expression. So how do you show what matters to you? How is that shown through your marketing? And if it's not there and it's only product, then that's a huge part of the brand narrative that's missing. And that will be your winner. The brand narrative. So what I say to people is that brand marketing is a thing. And that's who you are, what you do, what you're about, who you're here for. It's behind the scenes. It's the relationship stuff. It's the talking about the clients or your customers that come in. It's the long-standing clients. All of these types of stories that happen, winning awards, all of that stuff that people want to be part of. So an example of personality profiles, they've got a whole bunch of branded archetypes. People go by branded archetypes. People create their own. We kind of mix in a whole bunch of things, but you could be the wise guide. So you could be calm and thoughtful and help others make better choices. You could be the adventurous friend, which is energetic and curious and encourages new experiences. Or you could be the authentic traditionalist. So grounded, reliable, and honors heritage. We did one recently where we called our client Auntie Elaine, like Seinfeld's Elaine, and they're in sexual health for women. And now you kind of get the whole vibe of where we're going with that, because everything seems to be quite serious in that space and there's nothing really, that speaks like a normal person. It all feels really medical, and she's medically trained but wants to be something that feels relatable. So when you wrap up an element of humor in something that would otherwise be quite sterile, you're already separating from the crowd because you're creating that point of difference. And it doesn't mean you have to be funny. You have to be funny to be funny, by the way. A lot of people try to be funny and they're not funny. So you have to be funny in a way that your audience will resonate with that. But there is a way to do that as well as like a personality consistency test. So how would your brand handle a customer complaint? You think about what process would be involved in that. And what would be your brand post on social media? So what would be a standard post there? And how would your brand describe a competitor? You think about these things and it's all about the type of people that you have. There's reasons why we're friends with some people and not friends with other people, and everything comes down to their personality. So if the brand doesn't have a personality, it's missing a massive, massive opportunity. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for the next one. We'll cut it short. I'll give you 5 minutes. But just so if there's anything sitting top of mind that you can complete part 3 to 5 of the worksheet, even just jotting down some ideas that you've just had, and then we'll kick on. So I'll set the time. I will just do 5 minutes just so I don't go over time, and give you guys plenty of time to have a chat. Yeah, we've got a minute left. Okay, that's the last minute. So if you have any questions later on, we can jump back into this part. I did realize that I didn't touch on the audience psychology, which would have been part 5. So I'll just quickly run over that for you. I'll just show you what we're up to next. But the audience psychology is number 5. It's section 5. And basically what that's speaking to is beyond demographics to psychographics. And I think I touched on this last workshop that I did. So basically, just to give you a quick run through, is that surface level targeting would be like women aged between 35 to 55, household income 75K plus, lives in the suburbs. Pretty broad. The psychological targeting would then be people who feel overwhelmed by daily demands and crave moments of authentic connection with what matters most to them. What you actually do is you need to combine both of them, because we're seeing more value-driven purchasing, which means that demographics are great for a roundabout, but a lot of people could be buying value-based that are nothing alike in the demographic space. They're more about they believe in the same things. So they will buy because they believe in the same things. So it's kind of like a guide. I use demographics as a guide. I would know my audience fit within a certain range. They're predominantly this kind of audience, but it's also very interesting to add in the interests. And you'll see this with targeting with ads and things on Meta, whatever you're using, is that you can target interests. You can target what they like, what they're engaged in, and Facebook groups or Instagram pages that they follow, and it will send your ad out to people that follow those things. So that's why it's important to know that stuff. So the way I would say a psychographic framework would be like your identity drivers. So how they see themselves, the emotional needs, like what they're seeking to feel, their decision triggers, so what motivates them to act, cultural context, so what motivates values that they align with. They are really pretty much in a nutshell. So if you were to put that into, say, a practical application, your messaging should make your ideal customer think, this brand understands me and this is made for someone like me. And this aligns with who I want to be or who I want to buy from, essentially. People like to buy things. I know that sounds weird, but people do really like to buy things. There are people out there, that's their whole love language, is buying stuff. So, if you appeal to someone that wants to buy something, like we all do, you think about the first thing you do, you get a big cash injection, or you've had a big win, or you're going out, what's the first thing you do? You go out to do something. You go out to buy. You go out to buy an experience, or you go out and buy someone something. Like we actually really do enjoy buying things. We just don't like it when it's shoved down our throats, or it doesn't feel right, or the salesman is a dick and made us buy something we didn't really need and we hate it after we buy it. So there's that. So that's why all those, I guess, irky feeling comes up, especially when we're thinking about sales. I know that a lot of, I guess if you're upwards, you see that sales used to be really dirty, used to consider it to be something like the used car salesman. Whereas now, if you can do sales in a really cool, emotional, authentic way, people will buy from you. They like to buy from you. So take that into consideration when you do put your marketing out. Not everything needs to be a sales pitch. Balance it between storytelling and, sales, even if you are a product, because they do really want to know what's going on behind the scenes. And I think that that's important. So now I'll move into the connection part. So design is otherwise connection. It's like how you design the connection. And it's also how you connect with people. So it's like how memory structures work in the wine selection. So if we look at the science of choice in psychology, the reality is, and as we said, that 95% of purchasing decisions happen subconsciously. People don't remember features, they remember feelings. So it doesn't matter what you say, someone's always going to remember how you made them feel. Always, always, always. And it's why during COVID, we saw everyone change their messaging to, we're all in this together. Because if someone had put out a message that was tone deaf during that time, I can guarantee you, everyone would have remembered, hey, remember that brand that said that thing when the whole world shut down? So you would have seen every brand say something quite generic because no one knew what to do. And so this is why it's important to know the general vibe of what's happening. It's why it's very important to know if there's news events that come out, if something has happened, even if it's not here. Predominantly, I say to a lot of people that are, coaches or they have an international market, is to be very wary of what's happening in the States at the moment, what language is happening there. You know, you can't always be finger on the pulse with everything going on, but if there's some big, you know, catastrophe that's happened somewhere, and then you pitch something that feels a little bit tone deaf, it can come across quite bad unconsciously. So it's just about being aware of what's happening as well. If you've got something scheduled, maybe just pause it and then reschedule it later, which, you know, most of you probably already know. But like I said, decision making follows emotional patterns. So they're not logical processes. We're always driven by emotion. And in fact, even when we make a choice, even if you don't even realize it, it has to pass our emotional center before we can think about it logically. That's why when everyone gets drunk, they actually say what they feel, because there's no logic. That part of your brain gets hazy with alcohol. So that's 100% a thing that we all need to take into consideration. And so when we're looking at memory structure components, so this is the classic story of how do I stand out? How can people remember me? We need to look at a few different things. So one is a visual trigger, obviously, colors, shapes, packaging, that creates the instant recognition. But then it's emotional association. So feelings that are connected with your brand. So when someone looks at them, what's the instant vibe that they get from that? Because that's going to shape everything that they see forward. The thing with people is that they're looking for a way not to buy from you. Don't give them one. So if you keep giving them reasons, and a really interesting psychology fact is if you can get someone to answer a question, which is why you'll see something on a sales page, it'd be like, are you looking to have a really good time? Or are you looking to give someone something amazing that they will remember? Give them something to answer. They want to take control. If they don't feel like they have control as they're reading through your content, they're looking for a reason to take control. So that's why every time you see a sales page or next sales page that you're on, they're always going to ask you a question at the very beginning because they want you to answer it so that you are open-minded to the next part of the content that they deliver to you. So there's it's actually really fun. Once you get into this stuff, you'll be like, oh, this is cool. So yeah, think about that. There's even a whole range of things that you can buy on like pricing psychology. So there are little things like decoy effects, all these things with the way people price their stuff. Cadbury's do this now with chocolate. They have the 3 chocolate sizes. They make their middle chocolate bar. To make that more expensive, they actually added a smaller chocolate bar so they could bump the prices of their middle chocolate bar, and then they made the smaller chocolate bar more expensive. So in comparison, you think that the middle bar actually is cheaper than the smaller bar by weight comparison, when really they've just introduced the smaller one so to make it more expensive, so the middle one doesn't look so. It's quite strategic actually. And then we look at story patterns. So what narratives are things that make your brand memorable? Now this is really important. This is where the individuality comes in, because every single brand has a person within that business that has something that's happened to them. These are really cool things that you can bring in. For example, and I spoke about this last time, my brand story has evolved to now involve my son. My son has had a liver transplant. That is actually involved in how I've shaped my business and the types of businesses that I now want to work with, the types of organizations that I want to work with. And so now people now see us as someone that has had lived experience in that space, and they want to work with us because they know that we get it. I also speak to having ADHD a lot because I'm neurodivergent. Obviously, that's a different way of thinking. People in that space want to be seen, felt, and heard. And so when you talk about those things, people feel and see themselves in your content. That wasn't intentional. I just started talking about it on my own page, and a lot of people started to resonate. And I was like, so this is the missing link. And believe it or not, the last 3 leads that I've had come into the business in the last week were 2 neurodivergent business owners and a disability business that have come through because they resonated with my content. If I had done nothing about my personal story in the business story, they wouldn't have come in at all. So that's a really interesting thing to think about. And then the last one is the cultural signals. So references that align with your customer's identity. So perfect example was the wine there that we spoke about before, you know, the table dancer. Perfect. How does that align to the customer's identity? We know first and foremost exactly who that wine's for. That is, like, to me, that's perfect. Great marketing. And the way that you look at it is the wine aisle test. So in 3 seconds, what makes someone reach for your bottle? And it's not the back label copy or the awards list. What are they looking at in 3 seconds? Because that's literally how long it takes for someone to make a decision. Actually, it's less. So if you look at it like wine buying is often emotional, It is. We're gifting, or we're buying it for an event, or it's a celebration. It's not just like, we're going down for a Friday night. There really is some kind of occasional aspect to buying wine. And then also, if you are a regular wine drinker, it's an identity thing. So what type of wine are they buying? Why are they buying that wine? How does that make them feel? What type of status is that giving them? And it's like I always say, I always buy the most random eclectic t-shirts, because then someone says, where did you get that from? And I'll be like, Portugal. And they're like, oh, damn. Well, you can't have it sucked in. So it's kind of like that. What is it that makes you buy? Like, why is it that you do that? So this is where we dive into the psychographics of our people, because then you can get really specific on how you target them with your marketing messages. And so then we look at best brands create mental shortcuts in the customer's mind. So that's otherwise a heuristic. It's also like they think straight away of who gives a crap toilet paper, they're giving back. So when you do that, that's a heuristic. That's a mental shortcut. We also look at your job is to build these memory structures intentionally. So when we're creating the associations, what is it that we're trying to do here and how are we going to do it? And then remember that every touch point either strengthens or weakens your memory structures. So the way I like to consider it is, I don't know if you've ever seen a business that is a service business and they offer like every single thing under the sun. It's like you don't even know what they're good at, because it's kind of similar to if you were to look at maybe a winery that offers all different types of wine versus the winery that offers like 3 really good versions. You're going to go to them or you go to the pub. It's probably a better version. The pub with the biggest menu, you're like, oh, they're not going to be good at anything because they provide everything. Whereas if you go to the one that has like a shorter selection, you know that those things are going to be better because they're cooking them more frequently. If you know what I mean, they're getting better at crafting the things that work really well for them. So it's kind of things like that. It's the same thing with your messaging. And so how do we bridge it all together? So we look at the 4 connection pillars, which is like sensory connection. So like I said before, you've got visual identity that triggers immediate recognition. You've got packaging that communicates personality at a glance. And then you've got physical experiences that reinforce the brand memory. We look at emotional connection. So stories that resonate with customer experiences, language that reflects the inner dialogue. So what are they saying and how can you kind of connect that where they go, oh, that's what I was thinking. We've all had a brand do that before. Or you've had someone come and say, oh, is this you? And you're like, yes, everything you said was about me right then. So that's the type of messaging I'm talking about. And then we look at social connections. So experiences that strengthen relationships, reason to share and recommend, community around shared values. Cadbury's have done this recently. I've done a podcast episode if you want to go and have a listen where they've done a share a bar. It's very similar to the Coke share a Coke, but it's like share a bar where they've actually divvied up the chocolate bar into 3 sections. It goes like half and then like a third and then 2/3. And they've done it deliberately because they've said, this is how you cut up your chocolate to divide amongst the rest. It's like the one that does all the shopping. Then it's like the one that puts the shopping away, and then it's the one that just eats the chocolate. So then they've got like they've broken it up into who did the most labor gets the most chocolate. It's cool. So how can you do cool things like that, or think of cool creative ways like that can actually become an experience based on how they buy your product? So that's a really cool thing to do as well. And then obviously there's cultural connections. So alignment to what movements that they care about, or references to shared cultural experiences. Things like Australia Day or not having Australia Day, whichever one you want to go in there. It's very like, that's a cultural experience. Christmas, things like that. Graduation, celebration, weddings, all of that stuff. So strong brands activate multiple connection types simultaneously. They have different customers that may connect through different pillars. So there may be different parts of the brand that they come in. And then consistency across those pillars creates the compounding brand recognition. So it's like when you do the thing over and over again, it cements that trust. And they go, oh, okay, I can now trust this brand because they're showing up with the way that they've said that they're always going to. And they're not changing every 5 seconds because someone didn't buy for a 3-month period. To give you full transparency, for the past 2 years, I've been rebuilding and repositioning our brand. And it's taken 18 months for people to understand where we've come from, where we're going, for us to have our big hit moments now. So it is sustainable growth. you do need to come up with those quick tactical response, like, have a promotion or do a competition or something in the meantime, or have an event that can bring in those people to keep cash flow going. But, think of what it is that you want long term and how you can start. The way I see it is that your brand marketing is your sustainable long term messaging, and your tactile marketing is your tactical marketing is your short term campaigns, promotions, things, occasional seasonal stuff where you get them in to buy, in a shorter period. And you need both of them at the same time. So basically, where are we at? Where are we at? Do we want to take 5 or do we want to keep going?
Keep going.
Yep, okay. I feel like that one could keep going anyway. So the last one is really the action. And I think when we're looking at action, it's more about once we've got all of the other stuff done, how do you then actually go out to market? And to be fair, this shit changes so much. It really is a game of you've just got to do it. I think a lot of people try and perfect their strategy, and I can tell you that I was one of those people. I think I wrote about 15 strategies before I actually pushed out an execution. And the thing that works is just getting something out there, and then you perfect it later. So you do the thing, and then you're able to go, we did something like this, we did something like this, and we did something like this. This one worked. This one didn't. Or this one got heaps of likes, but this one actually generated sales to the website. Very different types of messaging, as you would know. So it's making sure that they're all still in alignment to what it is that you're talking about, but all serve their own purpose of how they fit into, the buying process. So if you're finding your unique connection points, we look at the current industry connections is like most wineries connect through, I guess, quality and craftsmanship, heritage, tradition, awards and recognition, and I guess like the region or where they're from. And then we look at like the underutilized spaces that you can use is like lifestyle alignment. So wine for people who value X. Or we look at the emotional state change. So wine that helps you transition from work to life. Or, things like social facilitation, like wine that makes conversations better. Or you look at identity expression, which is wine for people who believe Y, X, Y, Z. Do you know what I mean? And so then they go, oh, that's for me. That wine's for me because I believe in that. And even if they don't, they might go, oh, maybe I should read more about them because that's what I like, but I don't know anything about this brand. So I'm going to learn more about them because I believe in that. That's a values thing too. So we're seeing more value-led brands. I think this isn't going away. This isn't a phase. This is pretty much where 3.0, whatever we're going into, is with brand. So when you look at your connection audit, we need to look at or list all the current customer touch points where they can find you. Now, a touch point is a business card, it's signage on your car, it's like retailers or stockists, it's your actual physical, your premise, it's customers through email, it's social media channels, it's all of these different podcasts if you're on any, influencers, all of these different places that people like. And if you use ChatGPT or any AI, because if you can weed out some kind of thinking in the process to kind of get down like 100%. So what I would say here would be something like, can you list all of the touch points that a winery could have, or something like, and it might add some things in where you go, oh, I didn't think about that. So just start using it for ways that you can, like, I use it for more thinking, in terms of not necessarily my thinking, but expanding the broadness of how I think. So if I'm like, oh, because we're biased in our own thinking, and sometimes it will give you a response like, oh, okay, it will take you down a completely different direction. And that's really cool as well. Another thing I like to do with AI, if you are interested in trying to figure out ways to kind of generate it for ideas, is I'm more of a verbal processor, in case you haven't realized. So I find that if you were to ask me a question, I could rattle on an answer for forever. Whereas if you were to ask me to write it down, I would become quite blocked. So find what is easier for you to express yourself, whether that's writing, whether it's through voice. And what I then do is I take the voice through the transcriber, and then I load it into AI, and I ask it to pull out all of the things that I said, like a list of cool ideas. And I find that really works because then it's your own voice. It's not someone else's ideas, it's your own stuff. And that's when you can create your own point of difference as well. So that's something really cool. And so what you want to try and do then is also identify which connection type and each touch point activates. So, what are we looking at in terms of what does someone get out of that touch point, and what kind of response can it have? And so just thinking about things like that. And then we look at finding gaps where competitors aren't competing. Got a really cool lead magnet up at the moment. It's like find your brand gaps, where it will send you like 4 days of emails. I think some of you downloaded that last time, but it really just kind of highlights. So you could combine two things together, which is what it was the Good Pair Days, I think they do, a subscription service, right? But they did it in a really cool way. So you filled out the quiz, you answered the type of wine that you like, and then they select something for you, and that made it an ongoing subscription. So the type of wine you liked was delivered to your door. That's a positioning thing. And then you also look at, underserved markets. So it could be that there is a whole market out there that no one's targeting. Mostly the wine market tries to target, the wine connoisseurs, right? But is there a market there where there's a new generation of people that are drinking wine, that they like to drink wine? How can you target them in a different way, and what language can you use there? Like, there are so many different opportunities, and it really comes down to just mapping it out and having a bit of a brainstorm. And then obviously it's like finding gaps where competitors aren't connecting. So like, not just in terms of where you can serve, but where are there communities that they're not? Is there something that you can align yourself with that they're not already there? So these are really cool questions to ask. But can you design new touch points for underutilized connections? Are there places that you can enter that simply don't exist yet? So, for instance, I am about to do a networking group for neurodivergent people. That's my next passion project that I'm working on with an ADHD coach, because a lot of networking groups aren't made to be quite inclusive. So anyone that has autism or ADHD, they're quite sensory to lighting, to sound, to secondhand noise, and also there's different trajectories to how people feel and fit into spaces. And sometimes the standard way doesn't make them feel like that they're winning there. So having that space, I think, will be really cool. And there's a lot. I saw one yesterday for Indian women. Like, that's super hyper niche, but they're killing it. So it's just Indian women who want to connect, and they're in business, and it's so hyper niche, but they're killing it because they're so aligned. So I think what I like to say to people is, never think the market is too big. We need to look at it with a new lens. So what we look at music, it's like saying the music industry is massive. Yes, but how many subcategories of music do we have? We have rock music, we have pop music, we have classical music, we have jazz music. And even within rock music, there is subcategories of rock music. You have screamo music, you have punk pop music. Like, so then you start looking at what I consider to be, I call them like hyper niching. So finding those micro communities that are within the community itself. So a really good way to explain this is LSKD. I don't know if you know the fitness brand. They do this really well. They are a fitness brand at the top, and they also have stuff for lifting, stuff for CrossFit, stuff for running, stuff for yoga. And so what they've done is they've created almost personas for each of those things, where everyone's part of the LSKD community. But if you're a yoga fanatic, you're going to be part of the community within, but in the yoga space. And so that's how it's a really cool way to branch off and create sub communities, because where brand is right now is all about community. It's all about in-person experience, and it's all about belonging. So it's creating that sense of belonging with shared values and finding where that is. That's the hard part, but when you find it, it'll really, really work for you. And so it's just all about research. So let's move into the next steps, because that's what we like to see. It's the implementation gap. So why strategies fail is usually because there's no action. And that's what I was saying before. It's like we always try and perfect something, but when in actual fact, sometimes the most successful things are the things that take you 5 minutes to produce. And it's really annoying, but we actually don't know what the customer's going to do or what the audiences are going to do. It's kind of like you really just have to kind of wing it sometimes, and then go off, the standardized patterns. You have to find the pattern. So the statistics are 67% of strategic plans never get implemented. I can attest to being some of that. 90% of businesses fail to execute their strategy effectively. I can definitely attest to that. And then we also look at the gap between knowing and doing is where most brands fail, almost all the time. The common implementation failures is that strategy stays at leadership level, but it never reaches the execution team. The other one is that there are no clear priorities and that everything feels equally important, or that there's no measurement system to track the process. So they think that it's not working and then they cut some stuff. So there's a really good influencer that was talking about his process, and he was mentioning how he had a dip in sales and they couldn't figure out why. They had a lot of success with their ads, but then what they realized was that their ads were driving people to their website, that they were reading the blogs on their website, and then they were buying off the blogs. So they thought the ads were doing the work and they'd stopped writing blogs. And so they realized, they saw the dip in blog posting. And that's where they realized, oh shit, it was blogs all along. So sometimes it's all about finding what's working, where they're coming from, even asking the question, how did you find us, is a really good way to find out how people found you. And then obviously strategy gets overwhelmed by daily operational demands as well. So we can find that if the strategy is too complex to execute, you won't do it. So it needs to be as simple as you can make it, to your level of execution. So the way that I'd look at it is look at this 30 days specific actions and commit to it. So for instance, it might be, I'm going to post on social media 3 times a week in the next month, and just stick to that. Just do it. And see how you go. A lot of these people that have had big growth is I just decided to commit to 30 days posting and wow, all these people found me. It's because you were then present, and that's all it was. It was that you were then present, whereas you weren't present before. So it's inconsistent. So that's all it is sometimes visibility matters. Clear accountability measures. So make yourself accountable to do things, and have an implementation support system. So nothing works without a system. So at the moment, maybe it could be that you write a blog and then you use that blog to divvy up into multiple pieces of content. So then you get more bang for your buck off one, instead of going, I need to create 15 pieces of content. You can go, great. Now I'm going to make a series from this blog, which can create real series, or I'm going to make individual posts or a carousel, and all of a sudden you have a whole month's worth of content from one blog post. So think about how you can get more bang for your buck. And then also look at, obviously, strategy without action is just expensive decoration. The implementation requires both systems and accountability, and the brands that win are those that execute consistently and not perfectly. But the small, consistent actions compound over time. So there's a lot of quick wins in the action planning framework. So basically build strategy first, build strategic clarity first, easy implementations to show the immediate results, and then put the long-term value in. But each action also needs who, so the specific person that's responsible, what, the concrete deliverable or the outcome, when, specific deadlines, and why is the connection to the strategic objectives. So you can go and have a look at all of that. And then obviously, if you have any questions, because I spoke a lot, I am available to answer any questions. So there is that as well. I will stop this now so you can have a geezer. But yes.
Wow, what a fascinating insight, really, into driving into brand DNA with some really excellent examples as well. There was so much in that session. I can't wait to get it out there. But even sometimes you need to just stop and really think about your brand. You sit so closely to it consistently that it can be really challenging to see how do people see me, and what do I need to do? And just even your reframing of family owned and awards, recognized for quality and consistency, just as if that doesn't resonate with people much more than award winning. Everyone's award winning.
100%.
So yeah, amazing. So thank you, Tara, so much for your energy and enthusiasm, and for the worksheets. I know a lot of people will watch this back later, and also rewatch as well, because I think I need to just dissect a lot of that information personally. And like even just thinking about Emily's brand Table Dancer, there's so much you could do in that space,
Hugely.
so much. And I can't wait to see what she does with that too. If there are no questions or anything, I don't know, I'll open it up to you guys in the room. Everett. Yeah. But thank you so much for your session today. I'll get this uploaded onto the Rootlings YouTube. Reach out to Tara.
Actually, sorry, can I jump in with
Oh,
one annoying question? I just thought about it. I'll put my camera on so I can say hi. Hi.
Hi.
So I've got the table dancer, and then I have my other wines, which will be like geared a bit more serious and premium. But I guess at the moment it all comes under the umbrella.
Yep.
But those two identities are very different. And I'm still trying to figure out like how best to communicate one and the other. Like one's like high end premium, and the other one's like fun table dancer.
Personality driven stuff right there. So you would
Yeah.
say this one is for the, and then instantly, if they're not that person, they wouldn't align to it. It's kind
Okay.
of like a personality test. Remember, BuzzFeed used to do those things like, what kind of cheese are you? And you'd go and do the cheese, and you're like, I'm this cheese. It's
Yeah.
absolutely irrelevant. People just wanted to align with an identity. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. That's what marketing is all about, is talking to the person that that product is for. If it's not for them, they just don't listen. Like, you're not going to, when Apple release products that you don't buy, it's not that you go and unfollow or don't care about that brand anymore. You're just like, that's just not for me. So
Mm-hmm.
it really is just about finding the messaging for that person that you're trying to target.
And do you think it's better done, like at the moment, kind of it all sits under like one Instagram account, it all kind of pushes out from one place? Would it be better to separate them entirely, do you think, and make
As
it
in
really
product.
clear? Or
No way.
pardon?
I think it's just about you just need to find, because it's a product, right?
Mm,
The product isn't the brand is the brand. So
yeah.
you could essentially create a brand strategy that says wine for all people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't use that, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it could be that simple, where then people go, oh, great, you're catering to multiple types of audiences. And so then
Yeah.
you can use like a language that would suit everyone at the top, but then you can get really specific on who you're targeting with that product campaign.
Yeah. Okay.
It could be a whole
Yeah.
campaign that you release. Like, you could have girls dancing on tables and just do a really hard campaign just to women in that space for the type of person that you expect to drink that, and it'd go off. And those other people over there won't stop buying your wine. They will just assimilate the campaign that you create for the wine that suits them.
Yeah.
It's all
Cool. Thank
strategy.
you.
It's all fun.
And I
That's
just,
so interesting.
and because I sit quite closely with Emily's brands, like it's kind of like table dancer, like this is where you have your fun. But if you need to impress your new date, or you need to impress your parents, or you have a gifting option for somebody, who's a bit of a wine snob, that's where, the premium Glover wine semi-on. Or if you want to glow up and grow up, that's where you could be like, hey, here's the fancy, fancy
100%.
premium stuff.
Cross generational appeal. That's actually it's actually a smart strategy.
It's definitely what I was going for. It was
Yeah,
intentional.
good.
Yeah.
Smart. Good one.
Were there any other questions? I know both Lisa and Hannah work in established
Yeah.
brands. And I know when I was just kind of writing out, when we did our competitors market, and for one of the brands that sat in there, I was like, oh, it was really easy to see who that target market was. But then for the brands that had wines that range from value to premium, and they had a specific um core value, but like I really was confused by their target market because
Mm.
they have such a wide range.
Yep. And I think that you also look at it from the point of, we look at legacy brands, but I think there's going to be a huge shift, because we're seeing legacy brands really needing to work now. So Apple are now in a big panic, because Gen Z don't give a crap about them anymore. So like, Gen Z are coming through buying all these random different phones, and it's all going across TikTok. So they're losing that market, which is the next market, which is essentially the market that would buy all their stuff. But they're not doing it because they see Apple as being overpriced and just not what it was. So they're losing that market, and now they're scrambling. So it does go to show that even if there is a legacy brand, if they're not staying up to date with the cultural conversation, that they will easily die out, just like Kodak did, just like Blockbuster did, and it doesn't matter about the brand name. So I think that there is a lot of brands that will use their brand name and their heritage and their legacy, and they will always exist. But eventually that's going to get to a point where I think that they're going to need to do something else. When it comes to like what you were talking about with the wider, they are what we would call a generic brand. And that's why I always think it's really fun for smaller brands, because you're able to be nimble. Whereas if you are a really big brand, you do have to go through the avenues of what this can look like. If we do a rebrand, we're going to lose people. It always happens, but you gain a new group of people. So Witchery had a massive falling out. They lost, but they've somehow kind of whatever they've done. But yeah, that was I think that they did that really wrong. But we look at, they're trying. We saw Jaguar absolutely botch theirs up. I don't think that had a chance, but you're starting to see these bigger brands really try and do something, because a lot of the advertising used to come from traditional media, it used to come from the TV, and people are just not consuming that way anymore. So it's coming more from word of mouth, through influencers, through conversations online, and the smaller brands actually have a massive leg up here. In the bigger brands, I think it really just is about trying to act like a smaller brand as a bigger brand now. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Took a scenic route there, but we got there.
I always like a scenic route. You get examples. I do, but you get examples along the way.
Yeah.
And like I think about the Kia Carnival ride. That is my dream car. Like, how boring is that? But it's functional and it's a little bit sexy too. Like, I don't want a Jaguar. I don't want a Land Rover. I want a Kia Carnival.
Yes. And also, how's about the Kia glow up? Like,
Oh,
they have had a
exactly.
massive blow up. They went from like family affordable Toyota to like modern day electric kind of vibe. And at first I was like, I don't like it. But then when you see where they got to, you're like, makes sense. So it really is about, sometimes you need to stick to the strategy, because the strategy takes consumers, because they have to unlearn what you've told them and relearn the new narrative, which can take time.
And they're the only sexy minivan in the category. But sorry, Lisa.
Just waiting my time.
Sorry.
Yeah, my question is about, like, within our brand, our target audience, who we are, trying to chase, or who our clients generally are, is quite different to who we are as people. And I kind of always struggle with, like, you've got to have an authentic voice, but that doesn't always translate to who you're speaking to. Do you have any advice on that or anything? Because like, we're grubby farmers really here in Pemberton. We grow grapes, we're out in the paddock, but then, yeah, we're pitching to, western suburbs. That means something else to us in Perth, probably to you in Sydney, but, yeah.
So are you working for your own business, or are you within a bigger business?
It's our own family label.
There's a disconnect and you'll hit a block.
Yeah.
So you can still target those people. I think what it comes down to is that you will struggle because of that. I would take a look at how you can still talk about being grubby farmers. I think that that's actually something that would make people really value you. I think what's stopping you from talking about your actual true story of who you really are?
Well, I kind of do, and I do weave it in that, like, my father-in-law, my husband, who are the ones growing the grapes, are really, really very good at what they do, and they really understand growing, and like, they've been doing this for generations. And, so I'm kind of always weaving that stuff in. But, there's like, when people come for a wine tasting with us, we all kind of like swear and banter, and like that's that very natural sort of thing for us. But then the people that, like, we've got our clientele who live locally, who know us really well and know us as us, and then we've got the people that have actually been to our vineyard and been to our cellar door, and they get that experience and they all love us and become mega fans. And then there's the people that haven't met us and are just buying us at a bottle shop in the city. And that's sort of like, I'm trying to really develop our online presence to get more online sales, because not many people actually come to Pemberton where we are. So like, yeah, I just find it like challenging to kind of be marketing to people who live in the city who don't live the life that we live, or don't see us as we are
I'm going to stop
authentically.
you because you've just named your differentiation and you're stopping your own individualization because of a perception of who you think your audience is. We're thinking, so when I say that, we look at a stereotype of who we think is going to buy from us, because within every richo suburb, there are still cashed up bogans, right? Like, that's why I like to put it. But when I go and I hang around, or when I was in the city and I was working with all of those people, they're more people than they're people, right? So I think when you actually showcase who you really are, you're going to grab, those people are going to come to you. Like you said, the people that come to you and they hang around you, and you probably will get more people that will travel to you if they know who you really are as people, because it all marries up. That's the touch point.
Yeah.
If you try to be someone that you're not, if you work for a bigger brand, it's much harder to change. All I'm going to do is challenge you here to maybe be more like who you are. Test some content, because I think that is your differentiation right there, because that's something that other people can't be.
Yeah.
And they're the conversations that you have, and it will come natural to you, because when you're trying to be something that you're not, that's when it doesn't come natural. Like you're fighting to be something that you're not.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I should sort of clarify there that, like, you know, there's the paddock boys, and then there's myself and my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're the clean, presentable. You know, we know we are those people that we're marketing to. Yeah, and like also we're the wine buyers of, like, you know, the types of people, like. Yeah, so it's just,
it could be a whole series that you do where you've got like meet the people behind the camera, and you do like like it's kind of like introducing the personalities within the business, which is what people are doing now at the moment, where it's like The Office. You've got individual, this is what and they expect you to rock up like that, because when someone rocks up like that with that persona, they're like, oh, that's her. And then they see the farmers come in the back. It's like, it really is that nice feeling of there's a different perspective of it, and you would probably bring people in from that story.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It is. It's a matter of kind of getting down and like asking yourself those strategy questions, because this is what I always find when I go through a strategy with someone, is that the things they keep saying, and then I also do an analysis. It's called a pattern analysis on the contradictions that they say. So when it comes naturally, the brand grows. Otherwise, and you may find that it's working fine for you now, but you'll hit walls. Whereas when it's just easy for you to do, you'll come up with ideas that are just in alignment to what you do, and it will grow.
Yeah.
So who would have thought that a toilet paper company could be called Who Gives a Crap, and literally made money by the founder sitting on a toilet for 50 hours? That's literally how they became who they are. And it's a founding story, like, you know. So I think it's also, what do you want to be seen as? And do you want to feel comfortable in the way that it's like, we find that we deal with a lot of brands later on that have to go through a rebrand because they have to refine themselves again. But the first question that I will always ask people is, why did you start your business?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is right there. And then you just sell to those people, because there's people that will buy in every single category. You may not have wanted that answer.
No, that's, what I did say. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
No worries.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. Thank you, Tara, for presenting. And we will see you all at the next growing season professional development webinar. Bye.
Hey, guys.